This is where vitamin C comes in, why we need less vitamin C than somebody that's a vegan. Blood is a carrier of nutrients and oxygen and iron and all those sort of things. And when people come with bloods, they can have a alleged perfect set of bloods, and we can go through them. And then at the end, I say, but how do you feel? And they'll say terrible. Okay, so that's quite common. Or people will have terrible bloods, alleged terrible bloods, and feel fantastic. And this is my experience time and time again, that bloods are a handy marker, but they're not the be-all and end-all. And too many people are chasing numbers and forgetting their symptoms. Yep. So we need to get back to clinical experience and not science-based, or evidence-based, because evidence-based is studies and stuff that doesn't relate to real people. And it certainly is very frustrating, because the normal ranges in bloods are taken from people that aren't carnivore, aren't keto, aren't even low carb. They're eating 45 to 65% carbohydrates. So their bloods are not going to relate to how our bloods work. And there's some simple things that make such a huge difference, like the life of the red blood cell. And the things you mentioned there, I can go off track a little bit. So for instance, today someone was worried about their uric acid levels. Okay, uric acid. I have seen uric acid levels that are really high and the person is fine and no joint pain. And I've seen uric acid levels absolutely on the floor and they've got gout and joint pains and everything. And you've only got to see that a few times to realize that it's not just about uric acid. And uric acid is actually something, for instance, in your blood that you need. It's an antioxidant. It's used in the modulation of nitric oxide, for instance, which is a vasodilator and really good for modulating your blood pressure. So all these things, I mean, going really, really basic, people talk about insulin like it's really bad. Well, insulin is absolutely critical, but inappropriate high levels or chronically elevated levels of insulin are bad, but insulin isn't a bad guy. And it's the same with iron, and that's what I wanted to talk about, because this way of eating, people say, oh, well, you're going to have too much iron, you're going to have iron overload. Well, is that true? Is that something that's actually possible? And yeah, of course it's possible, but we need to understand the mechanism of how iron gets around our body and all those symptoms that you mentioned. Well, if you're not getting the nutrients, if it's not getting into your bloodstream, if it's not being absorbed from your GI tract, then it's irrelevant to how much you're eating, for instance. So let's say you have 100 grams of protein, you've eaten a 500 gram steak, and you've got 100 grams of protein, but there was a blockade in all of your GI tract. So it basically ended up coming out of your body at the other end. Well, you've eaten a 500 gram steak, but you've had no protein, all right? That doesn't happen, but I'm just saying, if you've got a leaky gut, if you've got problems with GI issues, if you've got very low stomach acid, if your bile production is terrible, you won't get the most bang for your buck. So we need to look at the whole system holistically to see what's going on. So for instance, we've got a thing called hemoglobin. Everyone, I think, knows hemoglobin because they've heard of the HbA1c, which is the test of your red blood cells, how much it's glycated, how much sugar is stuck to the hemoglobin. Well, what is hemoglobin? Well, hemoglobin is a molecule within your red blood cell, and it's two big factors of carrying oxygen and carrying iron, right? So if you're fatigued, if you're out of breath, is there something wrong with your oxygen transport? If you are finding you're having problems, for instance, hair loss and all those sort of things, yes, it could be undereating. Yes, it could be not enough protein. Yes, it could be overeating. Yes, it could be so many things, but also it could be related to iron. Is the iron getting into your system? Because iron is part of your bodily functions, your turnover. You need iron, you need oxygen to survive, basically. So everyone gets this a little bit wrong, but it's interesting because it covers so many things. Now, when people say, how do you get your iron? Most people say, well, you eat it, which is true, but it's only 50% of the story. So if you're eating a nice big steak, for instance, you get what's called Fe2+, ferrous iron. Don't worry, we'll explain it all. And that is a fantastic source of iron, heme iron, that is called. Now, if you're getting your iron from plants, that's Fe3+, and that's not really bioavailable. That bioavailable is a posh term for a nutrient that becomes tissue in your body. It doesn't become waste. That's all that means, right? So if you're eating lots of plants, for instance, you've got Fe3+. Fe, by the way, is ferrous or ferric, and then we're going to get into ferritin and all that sort of stuff. But let's keep really basic at eating iron from different sources.
I've always wondered why iron is Fe on the periodic table of elements. That never made any sense, but now I'm starting to see the connection. Okay, I'm tracking with you. Thanks, man.
Well, your body loves the ferrous, Fe2+, which is just basically how we get it from animal sources. It loves it. It doesn't need much work. It gets into your system, goes straight to your stomach, gets straight into your enterocyte, which is the lining of your stomach, and it's beautifully absorbed. Right now, if you get it from a plant, it's Fe3, so it has to be converted into Fe2. So it goes from ferric to ferrous. All right, that's the technical names, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. Now, this is where vitamin C comes in. Why we need less vitamin C than somebody that's a vegan. Because the only way you can get Fe3+ to become Fe2+ is through an enzyme. Enzyme, it's just a protein that does a job called vitamin C ferroreductase. All that is just saying it needs vitamin C. That's the first bit of it. Ferroreductase, it's taking Fe3+, reducing it to Fe2+. Ferrous, it's making it ferrous. It's making it like the heme iron, so we can absorb it. So you need a ton of vitamin C if you're a vegan or a vegetarian or eating lots of veg, thinking that's a good source of iron, to convert it to heme iron. Right now, do you remember I said hemoglobin? Well, it's called hemoglobin because inside the red blood.
One of the. Sorry to interrupt, just to make sure I'm tracking with you. That could be one of the many. Okay. One of the many reasons why then vitamin C is just not something you need to worry about on the carnivore diet. First of all, you're not for immunity and for reasons that you're just describing. Okay, great.
Yeah. So it's just another element of it was really just a side issue, right? So let's go back to the hemoglobin molecule. So there's a little clue in there. Hemoglobin. It's got heme in it and globin. So when the red blood cell is finished with, it gets broken down. The body is so smart, it decides that it's going to use the heme and recycle it and make that iron go back into the system, and we're going to use it. So it's not true that the only way you get iron is by eating it. It's also from the destruction or recycling, better word, of red blood cells, taking the heme back, putting it back into the system. So that's one of the common misconceptions, that we only get it from food. We don't. We get it from the recycling of red blood cells. Now, okay, so we've got that bit. We're quite happy with that. We're quite happy with the difference between the veggie form, non-heme iron, and heme iron. So we know that, right? So if you're eating this way, you're going to get better iron supplies straight in. But there is a downside to it, which is when you're eating this way, your red blood cells do live longer, which we've covered in another episode where we talk about the HbA1c can be artificially high when you're eating this way. The reason is the red blood cells live longer, which is provable with a reticulocyte count. So what else does that mean? Well, every minute when you're on a sort of standard American diet, you're recycling approximately 180 million red blood cells a minute. Okay, with this way of eating, it's about 120 million because they're living longer. So there's less heme coming in from the recycling of red blood cells. So what does the body do? Well, it starts to pick that up. Now, the storage form of iron is called ferritin. The body makes this storage form from the iron that's incoming and from the recycling. When it realizes that recycled heme is less, it decides to just increase your ferritin. So one of the things I get a lot of questions about is, why has my ferritin gone high if they get a full iron panel? Well, there's a reason. It's because we're eating the same amount, but we're recycling less heme from our red blood cells. It's not a problem. It's not pathological. It's physiological. It's the body being really smart. It's just saying, right, well, we're recycling a lot less, so let's put a little bit more into long-term storage. So ferritin going high is absolutely explainable.